Los Angeles. This is News 13.
That right-to-lifers find impossible to swallow.
And we'll tell you why riding the bus could be hazardous to your health. Well, being a bus driver in Southern California is a tough enough job as it is, but some drivers in Orange County think they are being exposed to an extra on-the-job hazard. It is a pesticide used to fumigate their buses. News 13's environmental reporter Pat Anson says that some of the drivers believe it is making them sick.
When I'm in the presence of the buses when they've been fumigated, it makes me nauseated.
The symptoms vary. For some drivers, it may trigger a bad case of asthma. For others, an unusual rash or headache. Randy Humber believes it has ruined his life.
It was so heavy, even sprayed in the air conditioning ducts, which they deny, that I just couldn't take it any longer.
2 years after he left the Orange County Transit District on medical disability, Humber says he is still sick.
I get trouble breathing now with the asthma, and I also, it affects my brain function, disorientation, confusion.
The alleged culprit in all of this is a pesticide used by the Orange County Transit District to fumigate its buses.
It's just an unfortunate hazard with doing business with a lot of people who come onto the bus, maybe bring backpacks or food onto the bus. You have to spray for cockroaches or ants.
Transit officials admit a mix-up in pesticides 2 years ago may have made some drivers sick, but say the one they're using now is virtually harmless. It's a common household insecticide similar to Raid that's used on buses around the country.
Unfortunately, with a product like this, with 750 plus drivers, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 people who are affected by some of the chemicals that are used. We're not the only ones, no.
Over 500 drivers and maintenance people have signed a petition asking the transit district to stop using pesticides altogether. Normally, these buses are fumigated every 90 days and then left to air out over the weekend before being put back in service. On Mondays, some drivers say the fumes are still noticeable.
Several times I've had customers come on the bus and say, it really smells in here. How can you stand to spend the day in here? They notice it.
But transit officials say they've had no complaints from customers, and for now at least, they have no plans to stop using pesticides on their buses. In Anaheim, Pat Anson, News 13.
Still ahead on Top Story. Breathing in the workplace may be dangerous to your health, but consider the alternative. Chemicals. In our modern artificial world, we are exposed to literally thousands of them every day. They're in our toothpaste, our hairspray, our clothing, even the food that we eat. Hundreds of new chemicals are introduced every year, and very few ever have been tested for their long-term impact on human health. Tonight on Top Story, News 13's environment reporter Pat Anson looks at how living in this chemical soup is making some of us very ill.
Warren, according to one study, about 15% of all Americans have developed an acute sensitivity to common household chemicals. It's a disease known as multiple chemical sensitivity, or MCS for short. In most cases, MCS triggers a mild reaction, like a rash or runny nose. But a growing number of people have symptoms that are much more severe. So severe, they become permanently disabled, prisoners of a chemical world.
I've had perpetual headaches from 81 on. You know what I mean? Every single day.
It started out with headaches and drainage from the head, nasal congestion, and within a 9-month period, my health went down the tubes completely.
It's overall immune system gradual breakdown.
The symptoms and the cause vary from victim to victim. For some, it was a single accidental exposure to a toxic chemical at work. For others, it was prolonged exposure to toxics in an environment that seemed to be safe.
I experienced a lot of symptoms, but I didn't relate them to being injured.
Debbie Sutherland worked as a secretary at a firm that sold chemicals to the aerospace industry. For years, she never understood why she felt so bad.
So a lot of the symptoms, there was the forgetfulness. or the memory loss, the confusion, the severe headaches, skin rashes, and such that all added up, I didn't know what was wrong.
How bad did your forgetfulness become?
Quite severe. I'd be driving home from work and sometimes wouldn't realize where I was. I'd forget where I had been and where I was going. And it was a route that I took every day. I'd lived in the area for 20 years. I was extremely familiar with it. I would read something and not remember what I read. I'd go to the grocery store and couldn't remember what I was there for. It was very frightening.
Did you worry you might be going crazy?
Oh, totally. I really considered the fact that I might be going insane.
2 years after leaving his job as an Orange County bus driver, Randy Humber is still sick. And like many others who are chemically sensitive, he's developed an acute reaction to all sorts of different chemicals. His stove in the kitchen has been replaced by an electric hot plate because he can't stand the smell of natural gas.
Tremendous fatigue, you know, from it. And it wipe me out. And then you become sensitive to chemicals and foods, and it's hard to eat just common foods, and it's hard to get around any chemicals. So driving your car is a problem at that point.
Even an ordinary office building might trigger an allergic reaction because places like this are loaded with toxic chemicals, from the formaldehyde used in building materials to the cancer-causing chemicals found in correction fluid.
It's bad if you stay in there for any length of time. There's so much toxic chemicals inside these new office buildings. You can't tolerate it very long at all.
The outside world is such a hostile environment to Debbie Sutherland that she finds herself spending most of her time at home, literally held prisoner by the chemicals most of us ignore.
Going to a grocery store now or to a shopping mall is sheer torture to me. I go in, and because of the chemicals that are prevalent in a grocery store, for instance, in the detergent aisle, it causes me to have headaches, to have breathing difficulties, and times to become nauseous. Trying to have a social life is almost impossible because anytime you go out into the public, there are going to be people who are wearing hairsprays or deodorants, perfumes, wearing clothing that's been at the dry cleaners, and the fumes from that make me ill. So I don't go out very often socially.
It is a complete lifestyle change. The foods, you have to change. The going out in public, you have to change. Friends, family, they just don't understand. They can't relate to it because they aren't that bad if they have it at all. And I don't know, it's just like desperation at times. It's tough. And they just don't understand, and you tend to get more isolated under that situation.
They think it's all in your head?
Yes, a lot of them do. But it isn't.
Chemical sensitivity is often confused with a bad case of the flu because many of the initial symptoms, like a headache or sinus problem, are very similar. The medical establishment has also been very slow to recognize MCS as a disease, and because of that, victims may find themselves going to several doctors before they can find someone who can say what's making them sick. There are probably thousands of people in the Los Angeles area who have the disease and don't even know it.
Another part of that tragedy, too, is that even if they do know it, there's nothing that there's no redress because you can't prove the cause and effect. You can't sue anybody. You can't.
It's very, very difficult to prove. Several of the people you saw in that story have filed work compensation cases years ago that are still dragging on because they can't prove what happened to them.
Very important story. Thanks, Ben.
Very disturbing.